Drinking water first thing. It sounds almost too boring to matter. Most people have heard it before, usually as one of those tiny pieces of advice that get ignored because they feel too simple to change anything. But after a full night of sleep, your body begins the morning slightly dehydrated, even if you do not feel dramatically thirsty. And that small gap matters more than people think. Sometimes the heaviness, the foggy head, the strange irritability, even the urge to reach for food or caffeine right away, can begin with something that basic. A glass of water first thing does not perform a miracle. It just helps your system wake up without immediately asking it to run on empty. That is why doing it before coffee, before messages, before the noise of the day starts, feels different. It creates a cleaner beginning. In a very quiet way, it tells your body that it comes first, at least for a moment, before the world starts pulling on your attention. And that may be the real power of the habit. Not the water by itself, but the kind of morning it teaches you to have. A small act of care, repeated often enough, can change the whole tone of a day. Making your bed. People love to dismiss this one. You are going to lie in it again tonight, so what is the point? On the surface, that argument makes sense. But making your bed was never really about the bed. It is about creating one completed action at the very start of the day. Before anything complicated has happened, before emails, delays, pressure, and unfinished tasks begin stacking up, you have already brought one thing from disorder into order. The brain notices that, even if only quietly. It registers movement, completion, and control. There is also something deceptively powerful about the room itself. A messy bed can make the whole space feel half abandoned, as if the day has not truly started yet. A made bed does the opposite. It gives the room a cleaner shape, and that visual calm removes a little background noise you would otherwise carry without noticing. It is not a grand achievement, and that is exactly why it matters. Small habits like this train a person to stop waiting for big motivation. You just begin. You restore one little piece of order, then another, then another. It is boring. That is the point. Walking after meals. For many people, the default after eating is to sit down, lean back, and slowly disappear into that heavy, sleepy feeling that comes after a full meal. It feels natural, almost automatic. But a short walk after eating can change that experience more than its simplicity suggests. Not a workout, not a power walk, not some serious fitness routine. Just a few minutes of easy movement. That small shift helps the body deal with the meal more smoothly, and it often softens that sluggish, overfed feeling that makes the rest of the afternoon feel blurred out. It can also clear the head faster than people expect. Instead of sinking deeper into that post-meal fog, you come back a little sooner. A little lighter, a little more awake. That is what makes this habit so effective. It asks for almost nothing. No equipment, no schedule change, no special discipline. Just the choice to stand up and move a little when sitting down would be easier. In older cultures, walking after meals was not some performance habit. It was simply built into daily life. And maybe that is why it still works so well. It is ordinary, low effort, almost forgettable. But repeated over time, it becomes one of those quiet habits that makes everyday life feel noticeably better. Planning tomorrow tonight. A lot of people do not begin the day by working. They begin it by figuring out what the day even is. They wake up, check messages, react to small demands, and spend the first part of the morning in a quiet kind of confusion, trying to decide what matters first. That is exhausting in a way people rarely notice, because it feels normal, but every decision costs a little energy. And mornings are often where that energy gets wasted fastest. Planning tomorrow the night before helps remove that friction. It does not need to be a full system or a perfect schedule. Usually, just choosing the 3 most important things is enough. Then when morning comes, you are not negotiating with yourself from zero. You already know where to start. That brings a kind of calm that has nothing to do with working harder. It simply gives the day a direction before the day begins pulling at you. Over time, this habit changes more than productivity. It changes how chaotic life feels. You stop waking up into mental clutter and start waking up into a plan. It is a small habit, but it can make a day feel decided before the noise begins. Going to bed at the same time. Irregular sleep is so common that many people treat it as harmless. A late night here, an early night there, sleeping in on one day and forcing yourself through another. It starts to feel like normal adult life. But the body usually works better with rhythm than with constant correction. Going to bed at the same time is not about looking disciplined or living by some rigid ideal. It is about helping your system know when to slow down, when to rest, and when to wake back up with less resistance. When that rhythm is unstable, everything else becomes harder. Your mood is less steady. Your focus slips faster. Good intentions feel heavier than they should. Even simple habits start asking for more effort, because tired people usually choose what is easiest in the moment. That is why sleep timing quietly supports almost every other change a person tries to make. It becomes the base layer underneath the rest. And unlike dramatic sleep fixes, this one is almost painfully ordinary. You keep the time consistent, even when it feels unimpressive. Then little by little, mornings stop feeling like recovery. They start feeling like a real beginning. Reading before bed instead of scrolling. For a lot of people, bedtime does not really begin when they get into bed. It begins when they start scrolling until their eyes feel tired enough to stop. The body is lying down, but the mind is still jumping from one thing to the next, reacting, comparing, checking, absorbing. That kind of stimulation can feel passive, yet it keeps the brain oddly alert. It is not rest. It is just a softer version of being pulled in every direction. Reading a few pages before bed creates a very different ending to the day. It narrows your attention instead of scattering it. The pace is slower. The mind follows one thread instead of 20. And that shift can make it easier to feel sleepy in a real way, not just worn out by screen light and noise. There's also something else hidden in this habit. It starts rebuilding attention. Scrolling trains the brain to expect constant novelty, while reading asks it to stay with one thing a little longer. That is part of why the habit feels so boring at first, and also why it is so powerful. It replaces a restless ritual with a calmer one. Night after night, that quiet swap can change how your evenings feel and how your mind holds itself together. The 10-minute tidy. Most clutter does not arrive all at once. It builds in small, forgivable pieces. A shirt on the chair, a cup left out, papers pushed aside, a counter that gets a little fuller each day. None of it feels serious in the moment. Then one day the room feels heavier than it should, and the mess seems too big to deal with, so it gets avoided even longer. That is what makes a short daily tidy so effective. It interrupts the buildup before it becomes overwhelming. 10 minutes is usually not enough to create a perfect space, but it is enough to stop chaos from taking root. And often, that is all you need. The real benefit is not just that the room looks better, it is that your mind stops carrying the quiet weight of unfinished disorder. Visual mess has a way of turning into mental drag. It makes rest feel less restful and simple tasks feel more annoying than they are. A daily reset removes some of that pressure before it hardens into stress. It also prevents that familiar weekend dread of having to clean everything at once. So the habit stays small, almost forgettable, but that is why it lasts. A little order each day is easier than rescuing your life from neglect later. Taking real breaks. A lot of people think they are taking breaks when they are really just switching screens. They stop working for a moment, reach for the phone, scroll a little, check something small, and call that rest. But the brain often does not experience that as real recovery. It is still processing, still reacting, still being fed more stimulation. A real break is quieter than that. It might mean standing up, stretching your legs, looking out a window, breathing deeply, or letting your eyes settle on something far away for a minute. It feels almost too plain to count, which is exactly why people skip it. Yet that brief pause can reset the nervous system more effectively than another burst of noise disguised as downtime. It gives the mind a chance to come down instead of staying half busy all day. And many people do stay half busy all day, even during the moments they call rest. That is why this habit matters. It teaches you that recovery is not the same as distraction. Sometimes the most useful pause is the least entertaining one. It is boring, quiet, and easy to underestimate. But that short emptiness is often what the brain needed all along. Journaling for 5 minutes. Journaling can sound embarrassing to some people. It brings up images of dramatic diary entries or long emotional pages written under soft light, and that is enough to make plenty of people dismiss it before they ever try it. But in practice, it can be much simpler than that. At its core, journaling is just a way of clearing mental clutter. Thoughts that feel huge and tangled in the head often become smaller and more manageable once they are placed into words. The point is not to sound deep or wise. The point is to stop carrying everything in circles. Even a few lines can do that. What went well today? What did not? What am I learning? Questions that simple can turn a blur of experience into something more solid. They help feelings become clearer and patterns become easier to notice. Without that kind of reflection, days can start passing in a flat stream, one after another, without much awareness of what they are doing to you. Journaling interrupts that drift. It gives the day a shape before it disappears. 5 minutes is not much, but it is often enough to feel the difference between merely getting through life and actually paying attention to it. Tracking your spending. A lot of people assume money problems always begin with income. Sometimes they do, but sometimes the problem is much quieter than that. Money keeps leaving in small amounts, in forgettable decisions, in habits that feel harmless because each one looks tiny on its own. That is why tracking spending matters so much. Not because it is exciting, and not because everyone needs a complicated budgeting system, but because it replaces vagueness with awareness, and awareness changes behavior faster than people expect. The habit itself can feel dry, even uncomfortable. Many people avoid it for that reason. They would rather not look too closely because looking closely might force a few uncomfortable truths into view. But once the numbers are visible, the leaks stop feeling mysterious. You begin to see where convenience turns expensive, where stress turns into spending, where little purchases quietly become a pattern. That is when money becomes something you direct more consciously instead of something that keeps slipping away in the background. This is one of those habits that starts small and practical, then reaches much further into real life. It is not just about saving money. It is about becoming harder to fool, especially by your own habits. Stretching before bed. By the end of the day, a lot of people are carrying more tension in the body than they realize. The neck feels tight, the shoulders sit too high, the lower back feels stiff, and the legs hold the weight of hours spent sitting, standing, or moving without much attention. Because it builds so gradually, that tension starts to feel normal. Stretching before bed is a simple way of interrupting that pattern. It does not need to become a long routine or a serious practice. Just a few quiet minutes can help release some of the tightness the body has been collecting all day, and that matters for more than comfort. When the body softens, the mind often follows. Muscles unclench. Breathing slows down, and the whole system gets a clearer signal that the day is ending. That can make sleep feel easier to fall into, and mornings a little less punishing to wake up inside. What makes this habit powerful is how little it asks for. No performance, no perfection, no need to turn it into something impressive. You simply give the body a chance to let go before asking it to rest. It is plain, repetitive, and easy to overlook. But sometimes a better night begins with something that small. Saying no more often. Saying no sounds simple until it has to be said out loud. That is when hesitation appears. People worry about seeming rude, disappointing someone, missing an opportunity, or being seen as difficult. So they say yes to things they do not have time for, energy for, or even real desire for. One yes rarely feels dangerous on its own. The problem is what happens when they start stacking. A small favor, a plan you did not want, a request you were too tired to accept, an obligation added to a week that was already full. Over time, those yeses begin to take more than time. They take attention, calm, and the feeling that your life still belongs to you. That is why saying no is not just a social skill. It is a habit of protection. It protects your energy, your schedule, your focus, and the space you need to live deliberately instead of reactively. And like most powerful habits, it can feel uncomfortable at first. People who are used to always being available often feel guilty when they begin setting limits. But guilt is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it is just the feeling of an old pattern breaking. Saying no more often does not make life smaller. It makes it more intentional. And that is where the transformation really begins. Thanks for watching until the very end. Real change usually does not arrive in one dramatic moment. More often, it shows up through small choices repeated quietly over time. Until one day, life starts to feel different. So if this video gave you something useful to think about, I would really appreciate a like. And subscribe if you'd like to keep exploring ideas like this together.